Welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're doing something a little bit different. We're trading in that glittering marble of the Roman Forum for the literal smoke-filled alleys of the everyday empire. We are going to experience the true, gritty, sensory grind of antiquity, really zooming in on the actual people who built and protected Rome with their bare hands.
We are totally stripping away Hollywood's version of Rome today. Seriously, forget the shiny, mythic world of high-speed action and those epic screaming charges you see in the movies. The real Rome, that was defined by smoke-filled alleys, slow, rhythmic grinds, and these endless, repetitive sensory loops. It was the everyday people, dealing with relentless physical toil, who actually kept the empire running.
Here's our quick itinerary for this journey through the gritty underbelly of the empire. First up, the gritty reality of Rome, followed by fighting fire with vinegar. Then, the rhythm of the ram, marching on volcanic gravel, and finally, the legacy of stubborn survivors.
All right, jumping right into parts 1 and 2, the gritty reality of Rome and fighting fire with vinegar. Let's head straight into a really dense, dangerous, and honestly fascinating neighborhood known as the Subura.
Just imagine waking up in the Subura. This was a gritty, incredibly high-density Roman neighborhood where the air itself was, well, let's call it a fragrant symphony. You'd step outside and instantly get hit with the smell of charcoal smoke, the sharp tang of street vendor garum, that's fermented fish sauce, by the way, and the heavy scent of unwashed wool from thousands of laborers. You are definitely not dreaming of the Colosseum here. Instead, living in this multi-story vertical tinderbox of an apartment, you're constantly listening for one dreaded sound, the cry of fire.
And when that cry went out, enter the vigiles, the urban Roman firefighters. More specifically, we're looking at the siphonari. These guys were the specialized operators of the siphos, which were essentially early hand pumps. They fought these absolutely terrifying block-level infernos not with magic or modern hoses, but with heavy water buckets and just sheer, absolute stubbornness.
Now these weren't your glorious, cinematic heroes arriving with high-tech sirens blaring. Honestly, think of them as the over-caffeinated IT guys of the ancient emergency world. They were constantly trying to optimize this chaotic bucket brigade and get broken pumps working right before the entire city block turned to ash. Their actual day-to-day methodology was just this intense sensory loop. Step 1 was a constant rhythmic splashing of water from the siphos onto scorched timber and hot stone, sending hissing steam rising up into the dark sky. But, pumps fail, water runs out, so step 2, they'd call in their backup, the centenary. And then step 3. This was their very specific, very stinging backup plan. They would literally smother the flames using thick blankets soaked entirely in vinegar. Just pause and think about that sensory experience for a second. You are surrounded by the stinging scent of hot vinegar and the heavy weight of sodden wool. It was the itchy reality of ash clinging to your sweaty skin. You definitely weren't feeling like a glorious hero in that moment. You were just a tired, thirsty person with a bucket, enduring an unforgiving sky god and hoping you could somehow stop the destruction. Okay, moving right along to Section 3, the rhythm of the ram. Let's shift gears and examine the more theatrical, but honestly equally grinding side of Roman destruction, siege warfare. So, if the fire wasn't in your own city, but rather at the gates of an enemy's, you might find yourself operating the Aries. This was the massive Roman battering ram, famously suspended by chains inside a wheeled wooden shelter. Now, if you've seen a Hollywood epic, you're probably picturing a screaming, adrenaline-fueled charge, right? But the reality of siege warfare was entirely different.
It really wasn't a sprint. It was a slow-paced, repetitive grind. Operating the Aries felt more like swinging a slow-motion hammer from the heavens. With every single swing, it produced a deep thunk of wood against stone. It was a sound and a shockwave that vibrated right through your very bones.
This massive machine was basically a pure form of architectural stubbornness. It was specifically designed to slowly, methodically convince enemy walls that they were nothing more than temporary obstacles in the path of Rome's expansion. It was just inevitable, grinding fate. And the environment inside that machine? Wow, you would spend hours in that moving wooden forest, totally enveloped in the distinct, awful smell of wet hides, which were used to prevent the enemy from setting the ram on fire, by the way. Your soundtrack was the hypnotic, almost sedative pulse of creaking winches. That repetitive creaking and rhythmic thunking was quite literally the sound that marked the end of an empire.
Section 4. Marching on volcanic gravel. Finally, let's transition away from the battlefield and look at the boring but absolutely essential logistics of the Roman road, the literal spine of the empire.
Because to keep those firefighters and siege engines moving, Rome needed roads. Every single day, legionaries traded their swords for spades. They essentially functioned as heavily armed construction workers. And to actually do this, they carried the sarcina, a massive 60-pound pack strapped to their backs as they built and traveled these incredibly expansive road networks.
This was absolutely not a journey of glory. It was a dusty, exhausting daily grind. You've got that 60-pound sarcina pack just weighing you down. Your ears are filled with the rhythmic thud of leather sandals striking volcanic gravel mile after exhausting mile. And your meals? Well, you'd be negotiating with a leather sandal of a breakfast, basically coarse bread filled with uninvited minerals like sand and millstone grit, literally grinding against your teeth.
And at the end of the day, there was no luxury resort waiting for you. By nightfall, your back felt like a question mark. You'd collapse into a tight leather tent, packing in so closely with the rest of your unit that you were essentially creating a human lasagna of sweaty comrades. In that tent, your one and only dream was of a world where your feet didn't ache quite so much.
It really makes you pause, doesn't it? I mean, how do our modern aches, our desk jobs, and our daily commutes in air-conditioned cars stack up against that kind of relentless physical rhythm?
Which brings us perfectly to our final section, Section 5, Legacy of Stubborn Survivors. This is the core takeaway from all these stories of splashes, thunks, and dusty roads. So, the absolutely crucial point here is this. Humanity has always been a collection of stubborn survivors. These ancient workers, these firefighters and soldiers and builders, they endured the plagues, the harsh punishments, and the gritty pottage of the past, literally all so that we could exist today.
We are the end result of their grit. They were the everyday architects of a massive legacy, proving that even amidst the choking smoke of the Suburra and the endless dust of a volcanic road, human beings stubbornly try to build something that lasts.
So, I want to leave you with this one provocative thought as we close out today's explainer. Considering that we are the direct product of their incredible, rhythmic grit, what lasting legacy are we building right now in the smoke and dust of our modern world? Definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the real Rome, and I will catch you in the next explainer.